So it's no surprise that when we look at our prison system, we see an over-representation of homeless people within the prison system. We're looking at anything between 15 to 25% of prison population made up of homeless persons, and it's very difficult to give an accurate account because of the way in which the data is gathered, but on average that's the number of homeless people, the percentage of homeless people within prisons.
So we have this very clear relationship where of the 86 or so thousand people in prison right now, you know, more than 10,000 of those people are homeless.
And when you're on your own on the street and you're walking down to where you think this person is going to be, that you know, and all of a sudden they're not there, their stuff's there but they're not there, it makes you wonder what's happened. And next thing you know, you've heard, oh no, they've been arrested. You know, later on that day you could hear another 2-3 people that you know they've been arrested. You
look at data that was released actually just again in August 2019, and you look at the issues around women in prison. And one of the things that you find is that certainly in the last year or so, whilst we had about 9,000 women who were actually imprisoned or sent to prison during that time frame, it's detailed by the government that somewhere in the region of 3,000 of those people, 3,000 of those women were deemed to be homeless. So that's an enormous kind of connection between homelessness for women and imprisonment.
Prison is a type of environment that can exacerbate conditions of homelessness. If you are housed before you go to prison, it's unlikely you're going to be able to maintain that housing when you're in prison, because you might not be able to pay the rent, for example, keep up with mortgage payments when you're in prison. Your relationship might break down if you're living with your partner while you're in prison. And so for those people who are housed anyway and are in prison, it's unlikely they're housed when they come out of prison. But a number of people who go into the prison system as homeless, and it's extremely difficult for those individuals to find housing at the point in which they come out of prison.
You go to prison, if you're a worker or even if you're homeless, it doesn't really matter. Once you go to prison, if you're renting a property and you're doing so many weeks or months, you lose your home. Flat out, you lose your home. I've seen so many men come into prison, you know, got their kids, so they've lost their kids, this, that and the other, but when they're being released back out onto the street. Now, they do say that they have a system in place in prison where they have to house you. They don't have to house you, and it's very rare that you'll find someone from in prison that's been housed. You know, when I last came out of prison before I sorted myself out, I was yet again on the street for 2 weeks. So I had no tent, no cooking facilities, nothing. All the shops were closed, so I had nowhere to go, no one to turn to. Councils were shut, job centres were shut, so what do you do?
What we know is that about 1/4 of prisoners who released end up being homeless. So somewhere in the region of 25% of people released from prison have nowhere to go. Which just indicates kind of that prisons are never going to be a particularly good way of actually dealing with the homelessness problem, because then people are actually going back and facing homelessness post-release. But more than that, it's also not a very effective way of dealing with their illegalities. There was data released in August 2019 which indicated that 2/3 of homeless ex-prisoners reoffended.
And it's just a vicious circle. Once you're back out on the street, they won't house you, so what do? You go back out and you become a prolific offender. You know, you continue the cycles and you go back into prison. You know, I've put myself in prison a few times on purpose to try and get housed, try and get off the street, because that's what I was told to do.
What criminologists do is they say, well, look at the backgrounds of these people, look at homeless people, look at people with mental health problems, look at people with substance use issues, look at people who've been excluded from school, and so on and so forth. And then look at the people that are in prison. And of course, that is the group of people. They are the people that we actually we incarcerate. Those people who often have had very difficult life experiences, and yes, they have done something wrong, and yes, they will have breached the law, and they will have been engaging in some form of criminal activity. But almost the middle section, the issue around the crime, becomes relatively insignificant. Lots of people will break the law, but only a certain kind of person is actually largely dealt with by the prison system and by the criminal process. It's not so much about the nature or the extent of the illegalities that person has perpetrated, but more that the prison becomes almost a vessel to house people who are on the streets. To assume that we're solving the homelessness problem by placing people who are rough sleepers into prisons, I think is to miss the problems of incarceration. So whilst it's very obvious to us when somebody is sleeping rough on the streets, that they don't have a home, that they don't have a sense of place, that they don't have that appropriate mechanism for supporting identity formation or for providing the basic nutrients that we need to grow as human beings. Whilst that's relatively obvious to us and visible to us in terms of rough sleepers, what's forgotten is that prisons are also institutions which do not have the basic features of a home. They are not places which allow people to grow.
You're in your cell most of the time. There's a lot of drugs, a lot of violence, a lot of debt, a lot of issues, depression, anger, different types of people that are in the prison as well. Doesn't help with whoever's in that prison. Say, for example, you've got a murderer or a rapist that's in there, and then you've got someone like myself that's just a petty theft, you know, and they'll put someone like me in with a murderer, you know, or someone with anxiety or mental health issues, you know, and that will cause a row, a punch up and everything else in the cell. And you get punished for that. You know, I've seen people get into debt in prison for £1. For £1. And it was over a bag of Haribo sweets. And this bloke actually got stabbed for it.
Prisons are also institutions which are grounded in loneliness. They're grounded in estrangement from close relationships. They're grounded in a sense of isolation. They are places where there is very limited private space, if any private space at all, just like we're on the streets. You could almost just look at the two together and identify some of the continuities between what the experience of homelessness is and what the experience of prison is. Because both of them share certain lived, affective or emotional aspects which are all about the deprivation of home. They're about the deprivation of love. And hence, you can almost look at putting someone from the street into a prison, that it's not going to address the problems that have been on the street. It's not going to address the homelessness and the emotional aspects of homelessness. And when you put someone into a prison, you're placing them in exactly the same kind of emotional constellation.
Get more from the Open University. Check out the links on screen now.